I first saw this pattern. Dave Whitlock had the Waking Sheep Minnow. This is a little bit different, but it's kind of in some ways the same idea. I'm using a Gamakatsu B10S hook, and this is size 1 aught. I want this big. I'm tying this mainly for pike and musky, although I could fish it for bass as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by adding a little zap-a-gap to my hook shank here, right back at my tie-in point. And then I'll get my thread going. And just like on all my bass bugs, I'm going to kind of lay out the tie-in area for the tail. Now on this particular hook, the back of the tie-in area is right there at the point of the hook. And I'm coming, other measurements, we said the point of the hook to the point of the barb is about the right distance for your tie-in area. So I'm going to just kind of keep that thread here. And I'm tying a kind of a perch colored fly here. In a lot of the lakes I fish back in Michigan, perch are one of the forage fish for pike and musky. And so this perch colored patterns, or fire tiger, fire tiger's got more chartreuse where perch has more olive. But those colored patterns typically work pretty well. So the first thing I'm going to use some yellow bucktail here. And so let me come in here, and this is a great piece of bucktail. The fibers are really long. This is a Nature's Spirit premium bucktail. So let me come in here and come right up and cut that. Grab my stacker here. I'm going to comb it out. There's not a lot of underfur in bucktail, unlike deer hair. When you're spinning deer hair, you have a lot of underfur. There's not all that much in this, but I can come and pull out a few of the shorter patterns. So let me put it in my stacker here. So I'm using a Drominus stacker. It's just a real big stacker. Great. They make great tools. I'm using their scissors as well. So we stacked it a little bit, and the tips, they evened up some. See, before I do anything, you can see where they're at. They're not too bad. So now I'm going to pull this out and pull all these short ones out. Now you can see the ends are kind of staggered now. As I stacked it, they slid down in there. So I'm going to what I'm going to do is try to find some of the shorter ones here. And switch my hands again and just kind of see if there's any short ones in there and get them out. Even this up. So now you'll notice that my thread is at the back of my tie-in area. That's where you want it. That's where you want it to start with. But you're going to take the butts and you're going to move them and line them up with the front of the tie-in area. Then come in here. Let's get a little bit of a loose wrap and loose wrap forward. The reason is the butts of the bucktail will flare. So you can see them flare just a little bit. So if you pulled that thread tight back here, that whole front end would have flared up. And I don't want that to happen. I could have walked my thread forward, I suppose, but it's just easier to kind of grab those couple of loose wraps. Now I'm going to kind of work my thread very carefully forward. And you've seen this before. We want to leave that little tuft right there. We don't want to change where that is at. Okay? So normally maybe I might do some flash as my next step, but I'm using this H2O synthetic material. And if you can see in here, there we go. You can see there's flash already in it, and I don't want to over flash, and this is kind of a orange yellow mix of hair here. So you can just use your thin synthetic hair, but you want something that's on the orange side of the scale there. You don't want to use very much. I mean, that's really almost too much. Let me pull a little bit of that off. The idea here is I want to create a, I want this fly to be pretty big, but I don't want it to be hard to cast. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to come to the front of the tie-in area. I'm going to take my two pieces or I'm going to take and I'm going to fold the material over the thread and come and I'm going to put it right here on the bottom, and then I'm going to secure it on the front with a couple of wraps. Okay, so now I'm going to bring this near side and I'm going to bring it towards the bottom. Okay, so I've got that in there. I'm going to wind it back. I'm going to keep it down towards the bottom. Now I'll come back up and I'm going to take this, and again I'm going to keep it down towards the bottom of the hook shank, and I'm going to put it in place. And so now you can see I've got kind of an orange belly on this pattern. Okay, you can see how long the fly is getting. Okay, now I'm going to take a little bit of this kind of olive yellow mix. It's H2O, and you can really see the flash in this, which is why I'm not adding flash. If I were adding fibers that streamer hair that did not have flash in it, then I would have put some flash in, but not a lot. Depends on the water I'm fishing. You know, tannic water, there's a lot of tannic water lakes in Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula particularly, and so on tannic water lakes that are off-colored, or if you're fishing in reservoirs where the water is dirtier or something, then you want more flash in the fly. Clear water, less flash. So now what I'm going to do is I can offset this. Okay, notice that it's not even. And the reason it's not, I'll do your side first. Let me come back here. I'll do the far side first, rather. Okay, so I'm going to lay that in there. By offsetting them, I get a little taper to the material. So now I'm going to take this and I'm just going to bring it right along the side of my fly, like that, and then come back here to the front. And I'll get another little piece of this. So you can see about how much I'm using. Again, I'll offset this one, because the reason I'm offsetting it is because I'm putting it together into a single piece. And so by offsetting it, I get a little natural taper to it. So I put this in. Get that wrapper two there. And then just bring that back along that edge. Okay. Now I'm going to go for this darker material. So basically what I'm doing is I'm building up from orange through kind of a yellow chartreusey color, and then the top color is going to be a little bit darker. And again, you can see there's flash in this material. So all these materials I'm using has flash built into it. So that's why I didn't need to put flash in this material to start with. Just a little bit more than that. Okay, now this one, I want to put on the thread evenly. Because what I'm going to do is, so I'm going to even this up on the thread down here as I look at it. So, see the two sides are pretty even. So now I'm going to come up here, I'm going to anchor it, and then I'm going to split it into a V. One on one side, one on the other side. So you can see I got a little V going with it. Kind of hold it one side, get a couple thread wraps started, then you can kind of come in here and hold on to it. Okay. You could stop there, but I'm going to take, if you got a little darker olive, this is just some hairline ice fur. It's just olive, ice fur. It's a little darker than the material I've been using, which is what I want. I'm just going to take a little bit of this. And this will just create a little bit darker top to my minnow, because bait fish are lighter on the bottom, darker on top. That's kind of all bait fish kind of have that pattern. So now again, this one, I'm not necessarily going to make it even on the, I'm going to stagger it like that, and then that'll give me a little bit of a taper. So I'm going to bring this back, anchor it right there, and I'm going to hold this together just right on the top of the fly. And just bring that on top, and that'll give me just a little bit darker color. And now I can come in here with my comb, and I can comb these out, and they'll kind of blend together. And you can get some of the, it'll thin up a little bit. You'll take a little bit off from it. Keep that orange down towards the bottom. Like that, and then you can see, I've got some kind of long stray fibers back in here, so I can come in here now. And I just kind of do a little bit of a trim with my scissors, just like you would a synthetic fiber, bait fish pattern. You don't need to do too much. There we go. That's probably good enough. Okay, so there's what it looks like, kind of combed together. Now what I'm going to do is, I could start by putting some barring with a marker on, but I'm instead going to use some olive, because I do want this fly to kind of have an olive look. So I'm going to use a whiting American olive saddle, and I'm going to pick a couple of feathers off from here. You can use Schlapen if you want. Schlapen feathers don't tend to be quite as nice as these saddle feathers are. They tend to be twisted up, but if you're just creating a fly, purely fishing fly, well, they all should be fishing flies, but I want this fly to look a little nicer, so I'm going to use saddle feathers. Let me get one more here. And I like the look with the saddle feather a little better than Schlapen. The feathers are just in a little nicer shape. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start by evening the tips up. Get the tips even. Then the other thing is you got to get the stems. You got to get the stems even. Okay, the stems kind of run through here. Oops, I blocked the camera. Stems kind of run through. You want to look through it and see that the stems are together. Okay, so I'm going to do my side first. And I'm going to take this back, not quite as long as the longest fibers, but close. And here's a little trick to putting feathers, mounting feathers on the side of your fly pattern. First of all, make sure your stems are together. Then come in here and just start with a couple loose wraps and then pull it down tight. Now come back and take your feathers and kind of hold on to making sure your stems are together. Just get a couple wraps going to the back. That way, you know, the stems stay lined up and the feather, let me trim out the butts here. That way, the stems stay lined up and the feathers stay together as a group. You know, they don't start splaying out, even though fishing wise it won't matter if they do splay out. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing on the far side. So I got the stems together. I'm going to come in here, lay it right in there, make sure these stems are lined up. Lay it in there, measure out to the tips. And by the way, I'm putting the curved side against the fly. You know, the feathers have a natural curve. This is the outside of the top of the feather as you look at it on the cape. This is the underside of the feather. I'm putting that underside against the fly so that the natural curve of the feather goes against the fly rather than flaring out like that. Let me get those stems together. Get my tips the same length. Come in here, get a loose wrap or two. Now I'll just put a little pressure on that and wrap back on it. Come in here and trim it out. And I'll just come in and kind of cover my tie down area a little bit better. There we go. All right, so there's what it looks like from the top. There's the other side. Okay, so now this is not a heavy tail. This tail's not going to soak up a bunch of water and get real heavy on you. And yet, you're going to have a fly that's reasonably long. This is kind of for pike and for musky. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a mixture, since my colors here are orange, yellow, and olive. I'm going to kind of do a mixture. And for doing the hackle collars, I use the saddles. This is a saddle. This is an American whiting American grizzly saddle dyed olive. Okay, here is a whiting American cape grizzly dyed olive, and the same with this one. This is a American cape. The cape feathers, the saddle feathers tend to be webbier, which makes them good feathers for along the side. These feathers tend to have less web in them, and so they make good for doing hackling collars. They're good hackling collars. Now, as far as getting the right size, you know, this doesn't matter. You can see how long these barbules are. Really, anything on these hackle collars, you're really just kind of filling in the space more than anything. And so the barbule length on the feather you're wrapping can be anywhere from, you know, 3/4 of the hook gape up to like maybe 1 1/4 of the hook gape, or even a little longer. I mean, it doesn't matter. They'll just get swept back into the fly. It's not like you're trying to hackle a Catskill style dry fly. So here are my 3 hackling feathers. You can see I gotta get them in the camera a little better here. I've got an orange, a yellow, and an olive. So I'll kind of line these up, come down in here. And what I'm going to do is I trim them. Then I come up like this, stroke these back a little bit, and I'm going to just cut on each side. So you can see I got a little brush there. Now, I'm going to mount this with the curve towards me. so that when it comes up, it's dry fly style. It's going forward dry fly style. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my flex cement. You guys have seen me do this before. You know, this stuff is goop. You just get it at the hardware store, you thin it with toluene, and you got yourself basically what is a day's flex cement. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just put a little bit right here on the wraps, and I got this nice and thin, almost like water. So that'll soak down through there. Let that really soak into the wraps. Then I'll come in here with my hackle pliers, take my thread to the front. Now, you want to not come past. You don't want you're trying to try not let your hackle suddenly start sliding off from this, because then it'll start sliding out in here, and that's the space you want for your deer hair. So as you hackle it, you know, think about that as you're coming forward with your hackle. And I can leave a little space because I got 2 more feathers to come through, so each feather can be wrapped, and it doesn't matter if it's tight right away. So I'm just going to come through with 1 wrap, okay, and try to leave that, try to put a little backward pressure. I want to stay up there on top. There's the second one. Now here's the yellow one. So this will just be a kind of nice blend of colors here that kind of go along with the overall color scheme in the pattern. Okay, now keep pulling your thread back a little bit. Keep it up on top there. And I'll do a couple of wraps here. And remember, you don't need a lot of wraps because you're wrapping these down into that glued section. Now I just come in, I'm just going to clip out my tips. Now I can come down onto the hook shank. Got a few wraps there to kind of anchor everything. Come in, do a whip finish. Okay, so there's kind of what it looks like from the top. And again, this is a really light tail, you know. Even though this is a pretty good sized fly, I won't have any trouble casting this. I could have cast it on an 8-weight rod when all is said and done. So there's the tail portion. And so we'll set this tail aside, let those glues cure up, and then we'll pull it out. We'll do the deer hair work on it. Okay, let's go ahead and let's spin the deer hair head on this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hackle collar and I'm going to sweep it back just to get it out of the way. So I'm just going to do a little thread band here, and as you've seen me do many times before, I'll come back and I'll cut this thread band and pop it out when I finish the fly up. This just keeps all the tailing, the collar, and all this stuff kind of out of the way while I'm working on the deer hair. Okay, so now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to wet the tie-in point with a little bit of Zap-A-Gap to help anchor my gel spun thread. thread head, come in and put a couple half hitches on top of that glued section. Just like that. Now I can come in here and snip it. Then I can come and do one more little pack on it. Yeah, now I got a good size for the thread head. So now let's take a quick look at it here. And I'm not seeing any, so see the bottom, see the sides, kind of look at it front on. You can see it's kind of balanced. You kind of start to see some of those colors coming out in the top of the head here. So the next step, we'll go and we'll trim. So now I'm going to begin trimming it. I remember I'm trimming a waking minnow, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first two cuts and they're going to be along the side parallel. I'm going to pull it out of the vise to do that. So let me come in here and I'm going to go a couple millimeters out to the side. And I just kind of saw my razor blade back through there. I want to kind of be symmetrical side to side. And once I get the cut established, I can go ahead and turn it sideways here. Okay, so now you can see side to side what it looks like. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my small scissors here, my small bladed scissors. I'm going to come in and it's a little pair of razor scissors, and I'm just going to trim out around the eye of the hook. Get all that hair trimmed right out from around the eye, get the eye cleaned up. Now you can see I've got it pretty well cleaned out. Put my scissors back here. Now I can go ahead and put it in the vise. I'm going to start by putting it upside down in the vise. So now I kind of look at it as I begin trimming it. And what I'm looking for is this center line between the point of the hook. Okay, so here's the point of the hook right there. You can see it right there. There's the point of the hook, and then up here at the eye of the hook, I kind of imagine a line along that, and I want to keep that symmetrical on each side of that line. So as I come and do the bottom and stuff, I'll take a look at the top and do the same. I'm going to start by being a little bit generous here. This is, now that's not near enough. I'm going to open up the hook point much more than that. But that'll kind of get me started here. Okay, and then what I do is I lay the razor blade on the eye of the hook, and I'm going to put a little taper on each edge. So I'll do this, let me do this upside down here, you can see it a little better. See, I just put a little taper there. Let me come to the other side and put a little taper on this side. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to flip this over, and now I'm going to come up through. This is where all those colors I stacked are going to start showing up. So I'm going to just kind of come back along the top. I want this to kind of be a little bit of a fish-shaped head, just kind of a little bit of a wedge head. But I'm going to trim it out. I'm not going to go real close right away. I'm going to kind of trim it up like that, and then come back in here and now what I'm going to do is I'll just see I've got these little corners here. You know, I've got these little, if you look here, you can see them in the camera. You can see that little corner right there, and then I got another one on this side. So I'm gonna just kind of round those corners out. Okay, so I got the one on the near side done. Now let me do the one on the far side. And all I'll do is kind of roll in the razor blade as I go, and I'm doing a little drawing motion to help the razor blade cut through the hair. Now I'm going to do the same on the bottom. Just kind of do a little rounding and take those corners off from there. Okay, now this head is still too big for the hook shank, so I've got to do a couple things here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that hook eye a little more. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to trim my bottom. Now I don't want to sculpt this bottom right up tight. My clocks are going off here. And it's 12 o'clock, so they're going to ring for a while. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this bottom off and open up my hook shank a little bit more. Now my other clock's going off. Okay, they're finished chiming now. So what I've done is I've worked on the bottom, and you can see I've opened up the hook shank quite a bit. And now I'm going to come in, I'm going to flatten these edges, these sides, side to side a little bit. I want to make sure I keep them symmetrical though. I'm just flattening the sides. Okay, now let's flip it back over. Well, before I do that, got a little more hair down on this side here. I'm going to flatten that just a little bit more. Try to get that to be a little bit more symmetrical from side to side. That side to side symmetry is what I'm talking about here. There we go. That's starting to look pretty good. Let's see what it looks like from the top. Yeah, that's starting to look pretty good here. Now, my head is still just a little bit too deep. I'm going to take a little bit more off. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to come in here. Remember, I want to keep that wedge shape going. So I'm going to kind of just curve back up like that and then come in and take that all the way back. That's getting pretty close to where I want it. Now you can see I put those little edges, those little corners in the hair, in the head again. I got those little square corners. So now I'm going to come and take those out. There we go. I think that's about it right there. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. That's looking pretty symmetrical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm going to cut that little thread band I put in there and release my hackle collar. There we go. Get those threads out of there. Now what I'm going to do, and this, you don't have to do this, and really this doesn't do anything to the fishability to the fly, because when the fly hits the water, it's going to do what it's going to do. But just to make it look a little nicer, you know, when it's on a stand or something, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to steam it. My steamer's over on the side here, you can hear it running. And I've shown you that before. One of the things that does too is it helps to expand that hackle collar out. There we go. I think that did it. Okay. Let me see if I got any little... Really don't. The head's looking pretty good. And it's about the size I want it to be. Okay, so now I want this tail to be big, okay, but I don't want it to be heavy. So I saw Andreas Anderson, this is a trick I watched him do. I wish I could say I thought of it myself, but I didn't. I'm going to come in here. So now one of the reasons I put bucktail in the center of this fly was because now I want to go get into the center of the bucktail and spread it around, and I want to get right down in here to the center of it, like that. So I'm kind of pushing this bucktail out around, and I'm opening up the center here. Kind of like that. And then I'm going to take some thick, this happens to be loons, but any UV resin will work for this. I use the thick, and I'm going to put a little bit of UV resin right here in the center of this, in the center of the bucktail. This stuff is thick. It takes a moment to come downhill here. So I'm just putting on a little ball or a little bunch of UV resin right down in here at the bases here, and I'm kind of pushing it down in around. Okay, now here's the trick with your light. Don't turn it on. Oops. Don't turn it on right away. Okay, keep it turned off, and then push it in here and kind of arrange the fibers and the feathers and all that kind of where you want them. And push it out around. Once you kind of get stuff where you want it. Okay, so I think I'm there. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the light on. There. Now you see how that all stayed there. So now we pull it back up, and we'll sweep all that back in there. Let me grab my comb. We'll comb it a little bit. You can see how this is really wanting to flare. So this created this really big tail now, this big profile tail. So you can see how the tail pushes up. Just comb out some of these fibers a little bit, get this tail to, there we go. So you can see if you look in the center, you see there's nothing in the middle. This is a really lightweight tail. So when it gets in the water, you know, it's gonna sweep back as you retrieve the fly. This is gonna sweep back, but then when it comes loose, it'll flare back out, and it'll give this sense of size to the fly, you know, as it kind of moves in and out. Put my feather in here, okay. So now I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to push that, and then I'm just going to use kind of a burnt orange for the thread head. So I'm going to finish it off with a thread head. You don't have to do this. I know some tires don't come back and do this, but I like the look of a thread head on a fly. I do think it adds a little bit of security to the pattern too, because you're wrapping over top of those you're wrapping over top of the gel spun that's holding the hair in place. Just build a little thread head here. Get my whip finisher. Come in here. So now you can see I've got that little thread head in there. I see a couple stray hairs I want to trim out of here. There we go. A couple of those chartreuse ones were real bright. Just come take one last look at things. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put eyes on a little differently than I've put them on. You see me put them on before. I'm not going to use the goop and the Dave's Flexament. Instead, I'm going to use just a Gorilla Super Glue gel. So I'm going to just pretty much put this right here, kind of in the center of the head, and I just put a little puddle of that glue there. And I'm using these yellow-orange eyes, which really picks up the color in this fly really well. Looks really nice on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set that right into that glue. And then I want to rotate it here. There we go. Now I'm just going to kind of push it and hold it in place for a moment. Got a little bit of excess, not much. So there's that eye. Then I can come over on this side and I kind of get this eye under here. I kind of am looking at that eye so I know from front to back I'm correct. And then I know just right in the middle here is where I want it. So now I'll come and get my next eye here. I'll set it on that little bunch of glue and I'll double check it from side to side across the top, and then I also double check it so that it's about the same height, and it is. So it's looking like it's all lined up where I want it. And I'll just take my little stick here and I'll push it down in and just hold it in place for a second, and then come and sweep out that excess glue. And then one last thing, I'm going to use my Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails on the thread wraps. And then, as always, I'll pull the feather through there just to make sure there's no glue in the eye of the hook. And so, there you have it. There's what it looks like when you look at it head on. Straighten it up there. There we are. And so it's just going to be a good little, it's a waking minnow. It's not going to do a lot in the water. You know, you can fish it on a floating line, but it's better off fished on a little, like a Scientific Angler mini sink tip, 5-foot sink tip, where you can add a little sinking tip to your bass bug line, probably like an intermediate, and you can get this to dive down and, you know, look like a struggling bait fish in the surface. So there you have it. There's a deer hair waking minnow, a little bit similar to Whitlocks pattern, but a little bit different as well.